Welcome to Call Me Crazy. I'm Kiana Lambert, and today we're talking about my time off grid living in an Earthship in New Mexico. Next week, we're going to be talking about 12-strand DNA and how to activate it. Let's get to it. Okay, let's get started. So, we moved to New Mexico in 2019 and lived there till about 2021. And we moved there because I was working for MedTrans at the time, and I was a base development manager for the Florida Panhandle. And whenever they merged with AMR, they restructured their company and they let a lot of us go. It was for the best. AMR is not a good company. I believe that all these big, huge conglomerate companies are not good for medicine. They charge $60,000 a flight. And so I felt like it was part of my soul that was separating me from this job that was really sucking the life out of me. And it was all about money and not about people. And so whenever the big company came in, I was happy to leave. I was happy to go. It was a tumultuous time, but it was for the best. And so we ended up moving before I went no contact with my mother out to New Mexico. They have a ranch out there that butts up to the national forest, and they bought this land because it has earthships on it. And my mother was always fascinated with earthships and living out on the land. She's a supreme narcissist, so she made it sound like it was a really good deal and it would be a really good place for us to go and live. And I wouldn't trade the experience for anything. It was fun, but it was also really bad. The way the earthships are supposed to be built, which was quasi how these were built, but you dig out the ground and you line the walls with tires that you ram with earth, with dirt. So you have tires stacked one across the other, and they make the walls. And there's no doorway, so it's just kind of like an S shape. And you use trash, as in they get cans and they fill the cans up with dirt, and then they line them on the walls in between concrete. So your outer walls are tires, your inner walls are made out of cans. And the whole concept is actually really cool, because if they had been built right, and they were really old, so they weren't built right, but if they had been built right, they would have functioned correctly, because they're supposed to keep you warm all year round and cool in the summertime, warm in the wintertime. And the reason that happens is because you have your outer walls that are made out of glass, and they make sort of like a greenhouse gas effect, which is keeping the sun inside. And you can have like a greenhouse in the front and then your dwelling in the back, and it keeps the sun coming in and it keeps it warm. And then the back part of the house, it keeps it cool. The ones that are built now have tubes that go way underground, so that when the hot air rises in the wintertime, it keeps your place cool, warm, and then in the summertime, it'll keep it cool with the tubes that go out and vent it. But these were not those. My mother always needed validation for the decisions she made, and she bought this ranch and these places, and she told us that it was going to be climate controlled and that it was great and all this stuff. So when we moved out there, we were not expecting that it was going to be balls cold and hot and covered in bugs. Even there were 3 of them, and she lived in the main one that had more than one room. But they were so freaking cold in the wintertime. It was unbearable. Like, me and the kids and my husband had to just cover up with like all the blankets we had. We slept in layers of clothing. And when it was really bad, we had to get up every 3 hours to stoke the stove, because each house had an iron stove, that kept the whole place warm as long as you kept feeding it wood. And the way that we would feed it wood wasn't, we wouldn't buy wood. You know, we would go and chop up and use the chainsaws to chop up trees that were already down, and that was fun. We would take the truck and take the kids in the back of it and let them ride around the property while we would hop off and see like a big tree, and then we would cut it up with the chainsaw. There was no electricity out there, everything was off grid, and the water would be collected from rainwater in cisterns and then pumped through the house to provide water. But we would use chainsaws that were electric, or the chainsaw that was gas powered, and we would go through and we would cut the limbs with the kids, and they got to cut limbs too and load it up, and we would have to do this in the summertime to build up the wood for the winter. And there are so many funny stories. Oh my gosh, not about the wood, but I built a smoker out of trash because several people had lived on the property before and they had tried to put up greenhouses, including my parents. And the wind out there is really, really rough, so it would blow these things apart pretty much right away. And so we would pick up the trash from around the property, and I decided to build with it. So I had seen how interesting it was to build a cob oven, and so we built that first, which a cob oven is basically an outdoor oven made out of mud and clay and straw, and you mix those together and you form, you know, a clay mound, and we had to buy glass bottles and fire brick, and we put it in the bottom, and you know, then you hollow it out and then you keep covering it, and then you fire it yourself, and it kind of like bakes into this really, really hard shell. And because the area is really dry and arid, you don't get rain all year round and you can leave it out. But in places that do get rain, they cover it with lime plaster so that it's waterproof. We also built a smoker out of the trash that we found around the property, and COVID had just hit, so we thought, okay, well, we're gonna buy a bunch of meat. We bought like $1,000 worth of meat, and then we cured it in salt. And then, you know, I'm like, you know, as if you know, you cure it with salt. You cover your meat in salt, and it dries it out. And then you take it and you rinse it, and you rinse it and you rinse it and let it soak in water so that the salt comes out. And then you take it and you slow smoke it. It's a cold smoke, and you do it for 24 hours, and you have to keep the temperature under 160 degrees. And so we stayed up for like 24 hours smoking all this meat, and then we vacuum sealed it and put it in our pantry. Well, the mice burrowed through the entire ground to get to this meat, and oh, they loved it. They ate about every single bit of that $1,000 worth of meat. And they didn't eat it all. I mean, they just, you know, they sampled every single package. They opened every single one with their little mouths and ate it. So that was fun to throw away. The funny thing is, though, is it's not that funny for us at the time, but the meat was so salty, because it still is salty, you know, after you cure it. It's still salty. It's like bacon. So they were so thirsty that they all drowned in a bucket of water trying to drink water outside. And I guess if you need a tip or trick for getting rid of mice out in the country, feed them some salty meat and then put a bucket of water out. They will take care of the problem for you. So it's laughable now. Back then, I still laughed about it, because part of living out there really, it's so physical, and also there is no 5G networks. There's no sound other than nature, and it was completely calming to the nervous system, to my nervous system. And the stars at night were incredible, and it really takes you back to your baseline. I still struggled because I was around my mother and she was really difficult to work with. But the rest of the time, being out there in nature and being able to live off the land, so to speak, and be able to function in a way that was not like in the city made my nervous system so calm. I felt more in touch with spirit and nature than I ever have anywhere else in my life. And it's really spiritual out there. You can really feel the native spirit, really feel it. And because their property butted up to the national forest, nobody was out there. There's no roads. There's no way people can get out there. It's just national land. So we would go traipsing around with the kids all over the place, finding arrowheads and finding mounds where dwellings used to be. And you could see the land and how they used it. It was absolutely incredible. The amount of pottery that's out there, pottery shards, oh, we collected so much. It was so beautiful and incredible. And we were very, very much in love with how to make pottery and how to live off the land, that we actually extracted the clay from the ground in the traditional way so that we could make our own clay pots. And we actually did it quite successfully. My daughter and I were able to make like these little bowls that we fired in the cob oven because, you need to get that up to over 2,000 degrees. And we could do that in the outdoor cob oven. We did everything except for the traditional Santa Fe black pottery where they burn cow dung over the pottery to make it black, which I wanted to do, but we never were able to get there. But the rest of the time, walking around the ruins and being out in nature was absolutely incredible. Now, this is a little bit different and it goes off the subject, but something incredible that we saw out there all the time were UFOs. And the information coming out now is showing that they're actually plasma. They're plasma UFOs and they're ours. And I believe that because when we were out there, we were seeing plasma UFOs that were red, and they would just form, and then another one would form, and another one would form, and another one would form. And now they're all over the place in the news, these plasma balls, the same thing that we saw out there, which is really interesting because where the ranch was by White Sands, New Mexico, and that's where the military installation is. So it was very interesting to see. It was very exciting, too, to see this in the sky. And then now seeing it getting caught on camera with people and them actually, estimating by using infrared that these are plasma balls just by the nature of how they move and how the infrared captures the heat signature that's coming off of them. And coming from a kind of weird family, UFOs and aliens, like my parents were totally into that, controlled remote viewing and aliens and all that. So I was automatically skeptical. But I saw it and my kids saw it and my husband saw it even before I showed my parents. And it was just really interesting, really incredible. I totally believe it now because I've seen it with my own eyes. Not that the military ones were UFOs, but we also saw UFOs flying around all the time. There was a really nice woman that came out there to stay for a little bit to have the experience and to work with my mother, and she believes in CE5, which is a whole contact protocol for UFOs, with Dr. Stephen Greer. And so we would go out there and see quite a bit of UFOs and strange stuff. And we thought that the plasma balls were UFOs as well, but they weren't. Obviously now, it's showing that those were military. And that's really interesting. But Lord knows what they're going to do with it. But that's another story for later. In the wintertime, it was cold, and in the summertime, it was really hot. We had so many bugs. We knew the seasons for the flies and the moths, and we bought a salt gun. I don't know if you know what those are, but those are the ones you put salt in, and you kind of blast little salt pellets like table salt all over the place. So they enjoyed blasting the flies out of the house with that, but the side effect was there was a lot of salt everywhere. I had to always sweep up. I laugh because I'm remembering that there was a bunch of juniper out there. Juniper grows wild, and I love the smell of juniper, but we had to take. I got into everything holistic, right, while we were out there because there was no TV, there was no internet, there was no social media. So it was like, just do something to keep yourself busy. So I brought a bunch of grapeseed oil, and I cut a bunch of juniper berries down and slow simmered them to extract the juniper smell. And it really took care of the bugs. It really did. But it was also very stinging to the eye when you're walking around. So things like that. I also learned to make soaps and lye, soap from lye, like we made our own soaps. It was so magical. Just being able to have the freedom to make your own things and live off the land as you could. And the town had no store. It had this tiny store that barely served anything, and it got better, but most of the time we had to drive 45 minutes to Albuquerque or to Belen to get food. And believe you me, we never drove so much in our lives in the summer. Just to get in the car with air conditioning and to be able to go somewhere and not be in the ridiculous heat was very, very much a treat every single day for us, because these Earthships were not insulary like the new ones are. They were so old that it was awful. So awful that by the time we'd been there for almost 2 years, we were like, we could not take another summer of this. Like, give me back the 5G! Well, there wasn't 5G back then, but, you know, we couldn't take it. We needed air conditioning. I guess we were too soft for the land of the peoples out there. One thing that was really interesting for the area as far as spirit goes is I believe, in crystals, because not the whole, I mean, yes, I believe that you can have crystals and you can do all that, because everything is really in your mind and you can just focus and that's what it is. But, crystal quartz and silica is how they store information. And the area around there is covered in white quartz. And you can feel like the memory of earth in the ground, and you can see how the earth stores information and how it stores energy, because information is stored in energy, right? So it was like the whole area was just pulsing with spirituality, with this energy that kept you grounded. It was really the start of my spiritual awakening until my NDE in 2021. But it was absolutely one of the most incredible experiences. And if you get an opportunity, they do invite people to go help them build these Earthships, because you can look them up and they've become gorgeous, and they are so beautifully made, and they're so engineered to where you can actually live in them and not have the experience we had, and grow your food in them. Grow your food in them all year round because of, the glass that faces the sun and how it creates that greenhouse gas effect in there. So if you ever get an opportunity, there are these builders and you can go out there and build, and they let you stay on the property in a tent or whatever, and then you build for free the next day. Some of them charge, because once you learn how to build them, it's a skill, and so they charge you to kind of take this whole course on how to build them. But if you get an opportunity to stay in one, they are the floors are earth, the walls are earth. There's the floors in the big house were just the slate rock that were already present there on the property. And it's like you are living at one with nature. And it's absolutely one of the best experiences that I had in my life. I mean, it was difficult, but it was also very rewarding. And we wouldn't trade it for the world. Except for, some of the bug experiences, we would probably trade those. And because COVID came about, we decided that we were going to go ahead and get chickens. Because they were making it sound really bad, like it was the end of the world. So on the property, my parents already had bought this $100,000 geodesic dome that they were putting together for a greenhouse to make food. And so those came in big, huge shipping crates. And what I did was took those shipping crates apart, and then we bought wood and we found some other cinder blocks on the property, but we raised the chicken coops off the ground and used these big, huge shipping crates to build chicken coops with, a metal roof so that the chickens could stay and not get eaten by the coyotes, because there were a lot of coyotes out there. Like, they would try to entice our dogs to come play so that they could get them. And the chickens we wanted to keep safe, so there was like a little fenced-in area, and for fencing, they use trees, fallen trees, and they kind of stack them together and rope them together, and that's the fencing. So we started building the chicken coops off the ground so that the coyotes and the badgers and all that couldn't dig underneath and get them. And we made fencing and covered the whole thing in chicken wire around so that the chickens couldn't get out, the hawks couldn't get them. We had like arches that I built over, and we covered in chicken wire so that the hawks couldn't get the chickens either. And I researched all about chickens and how to take care of them. Growing up, we had 250 chickens because we were in a cult, and that's how we lived, was with our chickens. And so we had chickens, and we had one chicken every Sunday. And I remember how we were supposed to take care of them, but I was a child, so I really didn't understand a whole lot. So I started reading about it and was determined to have a flock of chickens in case, the world ended and we needed to eat our chickens. And the funny thing is that there's a lot of reservations around there. So we went to this reservation store, and we got 12 what they call pullets, because Tractor Supply was out. Everybody was freaking out about COVID. And so Tractor Supply was out of their chickens. And so we went to the reservation to get chickens. And so we got 12 random chickens, and I was determined to keep every single one of them alive. And we did. And we got 4 ducks and 12 chickens. And we didn't lose a single pullet. The statistics were to expect to lose about half your pullets. So we got 12, expecting 6. But I was like, I am not going to let a single one of them die. And the way that they die looked like the most common ways they die. So, their butts get plugged up with poop. So, I made my kids, use a Q-tip and coconut oil, and we lathered those little baby butts up with coconut oil every day so they wouldn't get plugged up. And sure enough, I didn't lose a single pullet. I had all 12. But the reason I'm laughing is because we bought them from, a really reputable place. They were 12 roosters. You couldn't have laid an egg if you wanted to. So when you eat roosters, like everything you eat from the store is young chicken, right? Because the older you get, the more gamey it is, the tougher the skin is. And so you're supposed to eat chickens when they're young, not when they're older. So we raised all these 12 roosters together, and there were no laying of no eggs. There was no eggs. And I I find it funny now because we were, bamboozled by the people in their store. And we didn't get a single laying hen. They were all roosters. And they ended up, they were all 12 there when we left, but I'm sure they didn't last very long. I think last I heard they were gone. So either coyotes or, roosters will fight each other. They'll finish each other off. So that's sad. But the mistakes and the learning, that was a lot. And we now know better, and can identify the female and the male pullets if we wanted to, which we haven't done that in quite a long time. But it actually really, I think, makes me want to get land and live on our own and have that, because of the state of the world that's coming up. So it was a really good learning experience, and I think it gave me a lot of skills that will probably have to be used in the future. But I hope you enjoyed this episode. It wasn't a very long one. I could probably go on and on and on about the funny stories that happened out there. We'll just leave it there for now. Maybe one day we'll keep going into all the crazy stuff. A lot of snakes out there. So that was whenever I was like, and we're done here. Oh, the rattlesnakes coming up. Yeah. There was like a whole hive of like these little rattlesnakes like right outside our door before we decided to club out. But baby rattlesnakes can't control their venom. Not that you want to get bit by a big one either, but at least you can get away from those. But little ones, and our dogs were right there, so that was like a hairy time. We had to get them away from the little baby rattlesnakes. But whew, yeah, rattlesnakes are something you have to deal with. And I don't like guns, so it's going to be a learning curve for me to have to go out there again if we ever live off the grid or on a farm again. You kind of have to defend yourself against the wild sometimes if you need to. And I'm a vegetarian, so I don't know. If the end comes, I might just have to be like, all right, stick a fork in me, I'm done. We'll see. Thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in. Next time, we're going to talk about the 12-strand DNA. That one's a fun one. We'll see you soon.